Hi, I want to talk about color temperature. As you may know, color temperature is a very hard concept to understand, and a lot of people don't quite understand it, and I'm trying to explain it to you. Here we have the color wheel, and the color wheel is really one of the most important things you need to know when you want to understand color temperature. I'm going to paint in a division now of the color wheel, and this division is in a way the division between cold and warm. This side is cold and this side is warm. This is logical because everyone knows red is warm, orange is warm, blue is cold, and these light temperatures are inherently warm or cold. Now let's look at only these colors. From this orange to this purple. So what is warmer or cooler? As you can see, this orange is warmer because it is the warmest color. While this purple is colder because it tends to go towards the blues. Now you can see if we take this orange, then we can have a colder orange or a warmer orange. And this is because we still need to think of hues as relative temperatures. Hues is temperature. But also saturation is temperature. Because if we think about temperature, then we don't, especially in observation, don't need to think about the hues and saturation, because temperature is hue and saturation. And I will explain this a bit more in this diagram. As you can see, we have a very cold blue and a very cold and a very warm orange. And this blue is the coldest color. Coldest, while this orange is the warmest color. Warmest. And by adding saturation, we can even have a second dimension in seeing temperature. Going towards gray, the color becomes less cold or warmer. So in a way, this is the perfect gray. And this gray can be either cold or red, depending on the relative relationship. So here it becomes warmer by adding more saturation. So this two-dimensional temperature you need to understand and apply. So let's try to understand color temperature by studying some of the master painters. Let's look at this painting by Sorolla first and study it. You can immediately see that he used a clear purplish blue and orange yellow palette, and I'm going to analyze. And as you can see, he used a lot of these purples, and these purples are, as we have discussed, fairly cold. And we can see that it is on the cold side in this area on the color wheel. And we can just analyze the colors like that. It's probably a bit cooler, more on the bluish side. And the sky has this purplish color. Now the dress and the lights are inherently warm. Let's look at the skin tone first. The skin tones are most of the time very warm because they are orangey, so they are already warm even if you shine a white light on it. Now that we look at the sail on the back, it is also very warm and just a yellow. Yellow warms. I'm painting in the dress, which is a bit colder on some areas. So let's look at the color wheel. We go from this orange to a more purplish tone. And on the hue, on the color wheel, we can see that purple is a bit cooler relative to the orange. I'm lowering the saturation to make this even cooler. And it looks a bit dark at the moment, but that's just because we didn't paint in the dark ground yet. Let's use another brush that looks more painterly, like this. The ground is orangey, warm, has some purplish tones to it, and this is because it's lowered in saturation, so it looks purplish. And this purple is colder compared to the orange. Like this purple, this low saturated purple is a little bit colder than the desaturated orange. The ground also has some cool some cool spots. And I'm always picking the color, and then relative to the color I'm picking the temperature. Like this is red, then I'm going more towards the grays, so it's cooler, and shift the hue to some purple a bit. So this looks a lot cooler than the ground, but not too much. Now I'm painting in this background warm color. The dress here is fairly cool, and you can see this. It is pretty bright and purplish blue, and towards the top it becomes warmer. And to show this, I'm keeping it fairly low saturated and paint it in like this. And because these two colors, this color is warm and this color is cool, but they still harmonize because they are low saturated. So they both have something in common. Pushing in some of the warms. The head is also very warm. Looking at the greenish head, keeping it fairly low saturated because it's not that warm, it's just warm, a little bit warm, and then it becomes a bit colder here. And what temperature is this green here? As we have discussed, the green is on this side of the color wheel. So green is, let's say, a cold, light color. And in this case, it is a warm green. So it is cold, but compared to the lights, like this green has a light side. This green has a light side, which is cold, and a shadow side, which is warmer. So while the scarf is inherently cold compared to all these other colors, it is warm compared to the cold lights. Like I'm painting in the cold highlight now, which is a bit bluish, the reflected, the bounced light, or from the sky, I don't know. So this green just becomes warmer, even though it's cold. Painting in some of this cold purples, and we might want to make the warm dress here. This is warm. Warm, and I want to push the darks here. This is a warm hair, because as you can see it's brownish, and brown is warm. This seems to be logical, but it's really very hard to understand because temperature is so relative, but inside the color wheel it seems to be absolute. But orange is warmer compared to blue. So I'm trying to get this temperature right. I'm just lowering the saturation and it already looks cold, but it has a little bit of a green tone to it. So I'm shifting it more towards green. Now painting in some of these warms. And the warmest place is probably this face, because it is very saturated and it is saturated in orange. So it automatically gets a very high temperature rating, a warm temperature rating. Alright, if you look at it from afar, it might be accurate. Painting in some of these warms here. The shadows are very hot. And the parasol in this area is cool because white is almost always cool, but still warm in this case, because the sunlight is shining on it. But this dress here, because it's white, it is so cool. As you can see, it's low saturated. This dress here is also cool, and the coolness is supported by a blue-purplish tone, which is also cold. Warm. Alright, I think we covered most of the color temperatures in this picture. And we can look at another one by Soroya. Let's look at this picture first. So you can see we have greens here, we have blues, and we have yellows. Let's talk about the greens first. The greens are on the cold side of the color wheel, so in this case they are treated as a cold bunch of greens. As the greens turn towards yellow, they become warmer, and because they are saturated, they are very warm. The sky is cold. They are on the cold side. They tend to go towards purple. Then we have the clouds, which are kind of warm. And this might be because they are low saturated. Let's try it out. Low saturated and a bit shifted towards yellow as well. The sky is probably less saturated than I depicted. Alright. Let's look at the rock here. This rock is warm because it has an earth tone. So rocks are warm. The sea, the ocean is cold. And this seems to be very logical now. We have cold and warm colors. But as soon as we go into the light and shadows, we need to consider the relationships as even more relative. For example, in the stone area, we have a warm area, but also we have some cool areas inside the stone. So let's look at this. I have lowered the saturation so it becomes cooler. There are some red areas. These red areas are saturated and very warm. But because some areas are cool, they are also cold. This area, this is colder than this area. Even though it's still considered kind of warm in comparison to the stone in itself. This area is shifted towards cool, and they are very cool blues in the shadows. And Soroya used this very effectively. Here's the coolest area because they are so saturated. And in this cool area we have also some reds. And these reds are warm. Now let's look at the whites. The whites are purplish, kind of cool. This white is totally white, completely white, so it's cool in itself. Now let's look at the person, the woman. She has a very cool shadow, and this is because it's so purplish. Purplish seems to be kind of cool in this case, because it's low saturation, and compared to the white, which is cool. And it is cool because it is so white. Then we have this sweatshirt or something like that, and this is warm compared to the other colors. It is very warm, and even the light area is pretty warm, right? So as you can see, we can endlessly analyze these pictures, and I hope you understand this warm and cold principle. We have a very warm hair here. This is warm. But why does it seem to be cold as well? It seems to be cold because the hair has a very hot area, which is here, and compared to this hot area, this area seems to be cold, right? So consider all these relationships of cold and warm. Something can seem to be warm, but in relationship to something else, it can be cool. Always look in terms of relationships. Alright, the drawing is very inaccurate, but please, we are only looking at the temperature. We have a warm ground here, but it's also cool in some areas, like this, because it's so low saturated. We have cool shadow here. Alright, let's look at another painting. Alright, I think this is a very good example of cool and warm. And Thorn used a blue-orange palette. And really, he didn't use cold and warm light sources, but he used the inherent colors of the objects as a warm and cool contrast. So what we can see immediately is the ribbon, which is cold compared to all these other warm areas. The background is very warm in color. This is warm. We have warm shadows. The ribbon again, which is very cool in color. And the face, while it is still warm, it is also very cold because it's so desaturated. And the more it goes into the shadows, the more warmer it gets in some places. Like these shadows are warm and cold at the same time. This is cold, cold, some cold green. The shadows here are very cool. This is probably because of the reflected light of all these objects. We have this cold, 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 and the pattern is cool also. Cool pattern here. Alright, this was a very quick analysis. Let's look at another painting, and I'm going to paint this one properly, and I'm going to paint this one properly. We have this very purplish, warm purplish color here. And it tends to go towards cool because it tends to go towards this purple, which is cool. Then we have this very cool blue. But while it's cool, it is also still very warm, because compared to some of the coolest colors, like this blue-green, this is very cool. Let's paint in the face. The face is so warm because, for one, the inherent color of the face is warm, and also because of the hot sunlight. And adding all of this, it becomes so hot, and the shadows become so cold in comparison. Even the dress becomes fairly warm. This is too warm. This area is fairly cold, so it loses saturation. Going a bit lighter here. And it goes a bit towards purple. And there are a lot of cools and warms here. Some warm scarves. Warm waves. And I'm trying to get this purple to seem a bit warmer. And I can do this by lowering the warmth of the neighboring shapes. So by making this shape here cooler, this seems to be warmer, and I might want to shift this towards a bit towards red. So this looks very warm now. Adding some cools here. The hair area is very warm and orangey. Alright. Now we have a very warm green. While green is a cold color, it shifts towards warm in this case. So, because of the warm sunlight. So as you can see, I'm keeping it fairly yellowish and desaturated. The same can be said of the face area, the shadows of the face. Some areas are very warm and others are very cold, depending on the bounced light that we can see here. The lips seem to be kind of cold compared to the face. little saturation and making it a bit cooler. We have some warmth in the eye area here. The nose is way too big. So the shadows are cool because they are greenish. And Soroya is pushing the warmth by adding so many cools as well. The drawing is very bad. I'm adjusting some of the shapes first, because it's kind of annoying to have a bad drawing. This is a warm kettle which goes towards cools. The hand area. We have this cool background. Alright, let's refine some of the drawing. Because I think we got most of the temperatures in already. We can try to refine the drawing. So this area is very greenish. It seems to be desaturated, but also greenish. So I'm trying out some of these temperatures. And now I'm just picking colors and then picking other colors that are relatively warmer or cooler than the color that I picked. Like, compared to the orange, a red would look warmer, and in this area we have this very warm red. We have some very cool shadows. And kind of cool lights. This area seems to be cooler than the rest. Shadow that goes towards a warm purple. Warm purples here. Warm shadow here. And this area is even warmer. Now I'm painting some of the cool areas here. Some of the cool skylight. I think it's because of the skylight that is shining on this area. But it needs to be lighter. Very hot shadows. Adjusting some of the shapes so it doesn't look completely lost. Some of the strands here are pretty cool. Cool and hot. I'm making this area even cooler by adding some blues. Maybe a bit less saturation and lighter in value. Don't know how, but this area needs to be shifted towards green. This looks a bit greenish. But it also just has lower saturation probably. I think it looks so green because we have so many reds in this area. So just adding some reds so it looks greener. Kind of like this. Some cool bubbles. Alright, I think we got the temperatures now. Fixing some of the areas. Like making this here even warmer. And remember, everything is just relative. So you need to gauge what areas need to be warmer and which areas need to be cooler. So I hoped you learned a lot about color temperature, and if you have any questions, just post them below in the comments. I will post even more videos soon, so stay tuned. And thank you for watching.